Stay in the back. Embarrassing dress. Fletcher said it without even lowering his voice, like he was talking to a coat he didn't want seen on the chair. I smoothed the cheap navy dress over my knees, touched the silver locket at my throat, and nodded once. Calm, polite, invisible, then stepped behind the tall floral centerpiece like I belonged there. Across the corporate dinner ballroom, a man in a slate suit paused mid-handshake and stared straight at me. His eyes locked on mine like he'd been holding his breath for years. Then he crossed the aisle and said quietly, "I've been searching for you." I didn't answer. I just nodded again, the same small, controlled motion, like I was agreeing to nothing. Then my phone buzzed against my clutch. Bank alert. Account temporarily frozen. The orchestra kept playing. The dinner plates kept clinking. And my husband kept smiling like he'd won. Tell me exactly what was changed. Tell me where you're listening from. The maitre d' was pouring wine when Fletcher's hand clamped lightly at my elbow, steering me backward like I was a guest he regretted inviting. He'd insisted I come tonight. This acquisition dinner, this show of unity, this room full of his business allies and attorneys dressed like they owned air. But the second we arrived, he acted like my presence was a liability. I could smell his cologne layered over panic. It wasn't the first time I'd seen that panic either. When I glanced down at my phone, the bank alert wasn't a mistake, not a spam text, not a failed password attempt. It was a clean official message with the bank's number and a reference code. My stomach didn't drop. My stomach went still. Because you don't freeze a joint account unless someone's trying to move money, someone's filed something, or someone's raised a flag that can't be ignored. Fletcher leaned close, his smile never slipping. "Don't make a scene," he whispered, teeth shining for the donors. "If you act confused, you'll ruin everything." That was the first pressure, right there. The threat of humiliation if I spoke. And the discovery was already buzzing in my palm. He'd done something to our money. The man in slate, everyone else called him Sir, like it was a reflex, had stopped beside our table as if he'd forgotten the seating chart. Fletcher rose too fast, knocking his napkin. "Mr. Cross," Fletcher said, too bright. "Didn't expect you to." The CEO didn't look at him. Not once. He looked at me like my name was a key he'd been trying to turn in the wrong lock. "Nora," he said, softer now, as if he was testing whether it was still true. "It's you." I didn't correct him. I didn't ask how he knew. I didn't do anything dramatic. I just rested my fingertips on my locket, because it was the only thing on me that had ever been mine without Fletcher's permission. "Mr. Cross's gaze dropped to the locket, then to my hand, and his face tightened, like he'd recognized the shape of an old wound. Fletcher's voice turned sharp under his smile. "My wife isn't feeling well. She's had issues. My wife, not my name, not my personhood. A possession he could excuse from the room." Mr. Cross reached into his jacket and slid a business card onto the white tablecloth, right beside my bread plate. Clean edges, heavy paper, and on the back, in neat handwriting, was one line. "Call me, compliance, tonight." That was the first seed. An object dropped like a lifeline, and I knew it mattered. Fletcher saw the card and went rigid. He tried to cover it with his menu like it was a stain. Mr. Cross placed 2 fingers on the menu and gently moved it away. "I'm not here for you," he said to Fletcher, still calm. "I'm here because I've been looking for her." The room didn't stop, but my world narrowed to the card, the buzz of my phone and the way Fletcher's jaw flexed like he was grinding down a secret. My phone buzzed again. A second alert. Outgoing transfer declined. Account restricted. I hadn't tried to transfer anything, so someone else had. Fletcher's hand returned to my elbow, firmer now, his grip disguised as affectionate guidance. He leaned in, smile frozen. "We are going to the car," he murmured. "Now, before you embarrass me." And that's when I realized he wasn't hiding me because of my dress. He was hiding me because of what I might learn. So I stood, slow and steady, picked up the CEO's card and slid it into my clutch like it was evidence. Fletcher's lawyers at the next table watched me like I was a document that had started moving on its own. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I didn't plead. I simply nodded, once more, and walked with my husband out of the dinner that suddenly felt like a courtroom with candles. But as the elevator doors began to close, my phone lit up with one more bank notice. And Fletcher's smile finally cracked. What exactly had he tried to move? Tonight? In the car, Fletcher drove like the road owed him obedience. His knuckles were pale on the steering wheel, and his phone kept lighting up in the cup holder with calls he wouldn't answer. He kept flipping it face down, then checking it again 2 minutes later, like the screen was a heartbeat. "That man," he said, voice tight, "is not your concern." I stared out the window and let him talk into his own fear, because the pressure had changed. At the ballroom, the threat was embarrassment. Now the threat was control. "You don't understand what you almost did," he hissed as we turned onto our street. "You stood there like you had rights." I didn't respond. I held my clutch on my lap and felt the CEO's business card press against my fingers. When we pulled into the driveway, I noticed something small and wrong. Our porch light was on, but we hadn't left it on. The front curtains were shifted, like someone had been looking out. Discovery. This wasn't just a dinner incident. There had been activity at home. Fletcher got out first and walked around to my door, opening it with theatrical patience. He offered his hand like a gentleman. His eyes said something else. Inside, the house smelled faintly of printer ink and coffee that had cooled hours ago. Not my coffee. Not my habit. On the kitchen island sat a manila folder that hadn't been there when I left. Sealed. A strip of tape across the flap. And Fletcher moved fast to cover it with a dish towel like he'd forgotten it was visible. "What's that?" I asked, keeping my voice level. He didn't answer directly. "It's handled," he said. "Everything's handled. That's the line men use when they've already acted without you." He walked closer, lowering his voice. "I needed to protect us," he said, "the way people say I had to when they mean I wanted to." "Protect us from what?" I asked. His gaze flicked to my locket, then away. He pointed a finger toward the hallway like he was assigning me a place. "Go change. That dress. Embarrassing," I finished, still calm. He flinched because hearing his own words out loud makes a bully feel briefly seen. Then his tone shifted to something smoother, rehearsed. "I have a meeting tomorrow," he said. "Bank, lawyers, it's routine. You'll sign what they need, and we'll move forward." There it was, an appointment already made, my signature already assumed. I walked past him, not toward the bedroom, but toward the small desk in the den where we kept the household files. Fletcher stepped in front of me quickly. "No," he snapped. "Not tonight." I looked at him. Just looked. And for the first time, he didn't have a performance ready. So he tried intimidation. "You want to know what happens if you start digging?" he said quietly. "You'll find yourself with nothing. No access, no credit, no comfort. You'll be begging me to fix it." My heartbeat stayed steady. Because I'd already seen the bank alerts. Because nothing wasn't a future threat anymore. It was a current condition he'd triggered. I went to the kitchen instead and placed my clutch on the counter. I opened it and pulled out my phone. Then I opened my call log. New discovery. 3 missed calls during dinner from a number labeled Baker & Rowe LLP, Fletcher's favorite aggressive firm. And below that, 2 calls from Stonebridge Capital, a name I'd never heard in our household. Evidence seed number 2. I didn't announce it. I didn't accuse him. I simply turned the screen slightly so he could see I'd seen. His face tightened. "How long have you been watching my phone?" I asked. "I haven't," he snapped too quickly. "That's business." "Business that freezes our joint account?" I asked. He exhaled hard through his nose. "You don't get it," he said. "I had to place safeguards, temporary restrictions, because you're unpredictable. Unpredictable. That's what men call women when women stop being pliable." I walked to the fridge, took out a bottle of water, and drank slowly. It wasn't about thirst. It was about tempo. When you keep your tempo, you keep your power. Fletcher paced, then stopped. He pointed toward my locket again like it was a weapon. "That thing," he said. "You wore it on purpose." I touched it lightly. The silver was warm from my skin. It was the only piece of my past Fletcher hadn't managed to erase. "Who is Mr. Cross?" I asked. Fletcher's eyes flashed. "He's a problem," he said. "He's the kind of man who buys companies like you buy groceries. He doesn't remember people." But Fletcher was wrong, because the CEO had looked at me like he remembered everything. My phone buzzed again. Not a bank alert this time. A text from an unknown number. "It's Daniel. Please meet me. Cafe on Linden, 8 a.m. Daniel, Mr. Cross, the CEO. And he had my number. The pressure rose. Fletcher's control tightening, and now a new force pushing in from the outside. Fletcher saw my screen. His voice went low, dangerous in its restraint. "You are not meeting him," he said. "If you do, I will make sure you regret it." I lifted my gaze, calm as ever. "I'm meeting him," I said softly. Not loud, not dramatic, just true. Fletcher's mouth curled. "Then I'll do what I should have done years ago," he said. "I'll cut you off completely." He reached for the manila folder on the island, the sealed one. He tapped it once, like a gavel. "This is already in motion," he said. "Tomorrow it becomes real." I stared at that sealed flap and the strip of tape like it was a line I was about to cross. Because if Fletcher had documents ready, it meant he'd planned this. Bank, lawyers, signatures, before he ever told me to put on that navy dress. And if Daniel Cross had been searching for me, it meant my past wasn't dead. It was just buried under Fletcher's paperwork. So I went upstairs, not to change, but to pack a small bag. I set my locket inside it, beside my emerald ring, another piece Fletcher always called a silly trinket. And I slipped Daniel's business card into the side pocket like a match I might need later. Fletcher watched from the doorway, smiling without warmth. "Go ahead," he said. "Walk out. You'll come crawling back when you see your bank balance." I zipped the bag slowly, still holding my tempo. Then I walked past him and out the front door, because I'd rather face uncertainty with dignity than comfort with chains. But as I sat in my car, I looked again at my call log. Baker and Rowe, Stonebridge Capital, and I wondered what kind of business required that kind of urgency at midnight. What were they trying to lock in before morning? The cafe on Linden smelled like cinnamon and steamed milk, like a place where secrets pretended to be ordinary. I arrived early and chose a table near the window, back straight, hands wrapped around a ceramic mug I didn't need. My cheap navy dress was replaced by a simple gray sweater, but I still felt Fletcher's words clinging like lint. Embarrassing dress. The pressure now wasn't just Fletcher, it was time. Because I knew he had a meeting, bank, lawyers, and I knew my name was being used like a stamp. Daniel Cross walked in exactly at 8. No entourage, no loud entrance. Just a man with silver at his temples and eyes that held steady even when mine didn't. He spotted me and stopped, one hand tightening around his paper cup, like he couldn't quite believe the moment was real. "Nora," he said again, and this time he sounded like he was asking permission to say it. I didn't smile. I didn't melt. I wasn't a girl anymore. I was a woman who'd been managed, minimized, and nearly erased. "You said you were searching for me," I replied. He sat across from me, careful with the chair, careful with the space, like he knew the wrong movement could spook something wounded. "I did," he said, "for years. And then, your trail went cold." My fingers found the edge of my locket without thinking. Daniel's gaze dropped to it again. "That," he said softly. "I remember. New discovery." He recognized an object I'd carried through decades. I watched his face. "You're the CEO," I said. He nodded once, almost humorless. "I wasn't always." "Why now?" I asked. "Why approach me at a corporate dinner like that?" His jaw flexed, like he was holding back anger that had been waiting a long time. "Because your husband's name came across my desk," he said. "And because the bank's compliance team flagged activity tied to his holding company." There it was. Bank, compliance. Not romance, not nostalgia. Something administrative. Dangerous in a way that doesn't need shouting. Daniel slid an envelope across the table. Plain. Sealed. My name typed on the front. A visible object placed with intention. I didn't open it yet. "What is this?" I asked. Daniel's voice stayed low. "A notice," he said. "A pending move. Your husband is trying to restructure assets tied to joint accounts and marital property. He's doing it fast, like he's racing a clock." My stomach stayed still again. Racing a clock. Because something was coming. Daniel leaned closer, eyes sharp. "I need you to hear me," he said. "If you sign anything today or tomorrow, anything, without independent counsel, you could waive rights you don't even realize you have." I stared at the sealed envelope. Then I looked at him. "Why do you care?" I asked. He didn't flinch, because he knew that question wasn't romantic either. It was about motive. "Because I knew you before Fletcher did," he said. "And because I should have protected you then." My fingers tightened around my mug. "Before," I repeated, careful. Daniel swallowed. "You disappeared," he said. "I tried to find you. I hired people. I made calls. Your name changed. Your address changed. And every lead pointed to a dead end." His eyes hardened. "Someone sabotaged the search. Fletcher." The shadow of Fletcher reached backward, reshaping my past. Daniel's gaze flicked to my left hand. No wedding ring today. But my emerald ring sat on my right hand, something I wore only when I needed to remember myself. Daniel's breath caught. "That ring," he said. I didn't answer. I simply rotated it once, letting the green stone catch the light. Twist seed planted. The ring and locket were proof, not just jewelry. Daniel lowered his voice further. "My father," he said, and his mouth tightened around the word. "Didn't approve of you." A new name entered the room without being spoken. Powerful father. the kind that controls outcomes without ever appearing in photographs. He threatened you? I asked. He threatened everyone, Daniel replied. He had reach. When you stopped returning calls, I assumed you chose to walk away. His eyes glistened once, then flattened again. I didn't know you were pushed. Pushed. That word carried weight, not melodrama. Pressure applied until a woman moves. I finally opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet. Notice of restriction, account review initiated. Bank letterhead, reference code. The same code from my phone. Daniel pointed to one line. See that? He asked. I leaned in. Attempted outgoing transfer declined due to suspected unauthorized initiation. Unauthorized. That meant the freeze wasn't punishment. It was protection. But protection still feels like a cage if you didn't ask for it. Daniel slid his own phone across the table. On the screen was an email chain with a subject line. Stonebridge Capital, Bridge Funding, Fletcher Hale. Stonebridge. The name from my call log. Evidence seed number 2 tightened into something more. Daniel watched my face. You saw that name, he said. I nodded. I saw it last night, I replied. He exhaled. Then you're ahead of where Fletcher wants you, he said. The pressure rose again because, as if summoned by the mention of my husband, my phone buzzed. A text from Fletcher. I'm at the bank. If you don't show, you lose. Another buzz. A photo. A sealed document on a conference table with a pen beside it. And the caption, sign today, or you're done. My throat tightened, but my hands stayed steady. I slid my phone face down. Daniel's eyes narrowed. He's forcing a signature, Daniel said. Yes, I replied. Daniel leaned back slightly, then reached into his jacket and placed another item on the table. A second business card, but this one had a different name printed beneath the corporate logo. Marianne Holt, SVP, Compliance Liaison. And on the back, Daniel had written, ask for a hold extension. Bring ID, bring proof. I stared at the card, then at Daniel. You're telling me to go to the bank, I said. I'm telling you to go to the bank with your own voice, he replied. Not Fletcher's. My phone buzzed again. This time, a calendar invite. From Baker & Rowe LLP. Execution meeting, 11 a.m., notary present. There it was. The appointment coming like a blade wrapped in polite language. Evidence seed number 3 arrived right on schedule. I lifted my gaze to Daniel. If I go, I said, he'll turn it into a spectacle. Daniel's expression didn't soften. Then don't give him spectacle, he said. Give him procedure. Procedure. That word felt like armor. I gathered the bank notice, the compliance card, and my phone. I touched my locket once, then let my hand fall. Because Fletcher had built his power on the assumption that I would be quiet and confused. But I wasn't confused anymore. I stood. Daniel stood too, but he didn't block my way. He just said, quietly, whatever he makes you feel today. Remember, it's a tactic. I nodded once. Not for him, for myself. And as I walked out of the cafe, I realized the takeover attempt wasn't just about money. It was about forcing me back into the back seat. But I was driving now. Still, the notary meeting was in less than 3 hours. And I didn't yet know what Fletcher had already filed. What exactly was waiting on that conference table? The bank lobby was bright and cold, designed to make emotions feel out of place. A security guard glanced at my ID and waved me through, and I kept my shoulders relaxed as if I belonged here. Because I did. Joint account, joint assets, joint life. Even if Fletcher liked to pretend joint meant his. At the reception desk, I asked for the branch manager by name, not Fletcher's name. Mine. My name is Nora Hale, I said evenly. I need to speak to someone about a restriction placed on my account. The young teller's smile faltered, professional but cautious. She typed quickly, then looked up. We do have a note to route you to a private office, she said. A note. Discovery. Someone had anticipated me. She led me down a hallway to a small glass-walled room where a woman in a navy blazer stood to greet me. Mrs. Hale, she said, offering her hand. I'm Marianne Holt, SVP, Compliance Liaison. The name on Daniel's card. Evidence seed number 1. Daniel's compliance tonight had just become a person with authority. Marianne closed the door gently and gestured to a chair. I want you to know, she said, voice calm, this restriction is not punitive. It's protective. Protective. My chest loosened by half an inch. Marianne placed a folder on the desk. Thick, tabbed, official. Visible object. Then she turned her monitor slightly, not fully, but enough that I could see a timeline of activity. "Last night," she said, "we received an attempted transfer request from your joint account." I kept my face still. "I didn't request any transfer," I replied. Marianne nodded. "Our system agrees. The device signature and IP location did not match your typical pattern." My eyes sharpened. Device signature. That meant someone had used different credentials, a different phone, a different computer. Marianne continued. "There was also a request to add a new authorized signer," she said. My stomach went still again. "Who?" I asked. Marianne tapped a line on the screen. A name appeared. Graham Voss. I didn't recognize it, but I recognized the tactic. A stranger inserted as a gatekeeper. "A lawyer?" I asked. Marianne's expression stayed neutral. "The request came through a legal channel," she said carefully, "but the signer was not you." Pressure tightened in my throat. Because if Fletcher had added someone, he'd been trying to reroute control away from me permanently. Marianne slid a printed page across the desk. A form. And next to the signature line was a sticky note in crisp handwriting. "Sign here. Spouse waiver." There it was. The kind of small note men assume women won't notice. But I noticed. I noticed everything now. Marianne watched my eyes move. "This form was submitted with a packet from Baker & Rowe LLP," she said. My call log seed tightened into a knot. "Fletcher's firm," I said. Marianne didn't confirm directly, but she didn't need to. She turned another page. A legal cover sheet. Emergency petition for asset restriction pending injunction. So that was Fletcher's play. If he couldn't move the money cleanly, he'd freeze it legally to starve me into compliance. "That's why I got the bank alert," I said. Marianne nodded. "Yes," she replied. "But it's important you understand. We froze the account under internal compliance authority first, because the transfer attempt triggered a fraud protocol. Fraud. Not just safeguards, not just routine. Fraud. The word landed like a door locking behind Fletcher, not behind me. I took a slow breath. "What do I need to do?" I asked. Marianne's posture stayed professional, but her eyes softened slightly. "I can extend the hold," she said. "So no further movement happens until ownership and intent are verified." "And Fletcher?" I asked. Marianne chose her words carefully. "He will be notified that a review is in process," she said. "He will not be able to override it." That was power. Not emotional power, administrative power. The kind that doesn't care how charming a man is. My phone buzzed. Fletcher again. "Where are you? Notary is waiting." Pressure escalated. The signing meeting was happening whether I showed or not. Marianne looked at my screen briefly, then back at me. "If there's a notary involved," she said, "that means documents are being executed." I reached into my bag and pulled out the sealed manila folder I'd taken from my kitchen island when Fletcher wasn't looking. Yes, I'd taken it. Quietly, dignified. Because if someone seals something in your house like you're a child, you are allowed to unseal it. I placed it on Marianne's desk, sealed flap, tape, visible object. "I found this at home," I said. Marianne didn't open it. She couldn't, not legally. But she pointed to the outside, a shipping label, return address, Baker & Rowe LLP. And beneath my name was an email printed in small type. Not mine. Nora Hale 62RM, except the domain was wrong. One letter off from my real email. Evidence seed number 3, now visible in ink. A fake email. A misdirection. The kind of detail that lets someone intercept confirmations, reset passwords, claim you didn't respond. Marianne's eyes sharpened. "That," she said quietly, "is significant." I nodded. Not with emotion. With recognition. Marianne stood and opened a filing cabinet, pulling out a simple checklist. "Here's what we can do today," she said. "Verify your identity, verify your contact channels, lock down authorized signers, and document your objection to any waiver or transfer request." Document, procedure, armor. I pulled out my ID, my phone, and Daniel's compliance card. Marianne took them one by one, efficient, precise. Then she looked up. "One more thing," she said. "This compliance review, this doesn't come from nowhere." I held her gaze. "It was escalated by an external inquiry," she said. My pulse flickered. "By who?" I asked. Marianne didn't smile. "A corporate officer," she said. "Someone with standing who saw your name tied to prior flagged activity." Daniel. The CEO had pushed the right lever, not to save me, but to make the system do what it's designed to do. No magic, just mechanisms. Marianne slid a fresh paper across the desk. A statement for me to sign. Not a waiver, not surrender. A formal objection. I picked up the pen, and for the first time in years, I signed my name as if it belonged to me. Then Marianne's phone rang. She listened briefly, then covered the receiver. "Mrs. Hale," she said, "your husband is here." My spine stayed straight. "He's demanding access," she added, "and he brought counsel." I capped the pen slowly, placed it down, and reached for my locket. Because the next scene wasn't going to be a ballroom, it was going to be a table, and Fletcher would expect me to fold. So I stood and asked Marianne one question. "Can you print the hold notice," I said, "with today's timestamp?" Marianne nodded once, and as the printer began to hum, I realized the confrontation was no longer about who could shout louder. It was about who could prove more. Would Fletcher still smile when the paper hit the table? The conference room at the bank was smaller than Fletcher would have preferred. No grand lobby audience, no gala chandeliers, just a rectangular table, 4 chairs, and a box of pens that looked like they'd been ordered in bulk. Fletcher sat on one side with a man in a charcoal suit, his attorney from Baker & Rowe, and another man I didn't recognize. Clean cut, watch too expensive. Graham Voss. The unauthorized signer name Marianne had shown me. Seeing him in the flesh made my stomach go cold, because now the fraud had a face. On the table in front of Fletcher was a neat stack of documents, clipped, flagged with sticky tabs. And beside it, like an accusation, sat a notary stamp. Pressure escalated. They were ready to execute without me. Fletcher's eyes snapped to mine as I entered. He smiled too wide, like he was trying to project certainty back into a situation that had started slipping. "There you are," he said, voice dripping with false relief. "We've been waiting." I didn't respond. I placed my own folder on the table. Marianne's printed hold notice, time-stamped, plus a 1-page identity verification receipt, plus my formal objection. Visible objects. Paper that didn't care about Fletcher's tone. The attorney from Baker & Rowe leaned forward, polite and predatory. "Mrs. Hale," he said, "we're simply streamlining necessary protections given recent instability." Instability. Another word men use when women refuse to cooperate. Fletcher tapped the top page of his stack. "This is simple," he said. "You sign, you go home, and you stop letting strangers fill your head." I glanced at Graham Voss. He didn't look at me. He looked at Fletcher like he was waiting for a cue. That was discovery. Graham wasn't here as a neutral party. He was here as an instrument. Marianne entered behind me and took a seat at the far end of the table. She didn't smile. She didn't socialize. She opened a slim folder and placed it neatly in front of her. Procedure had arrived. The notary, a middle-aged woman with a calm face, cleared her throat. "Before anyone signs," she said, "I need to verify identity and confirm willingness." Fletcher let out a short laugh. "Of course," he said. "My wife is fine." I met the notary's gaze. "I'm willing to sign," I said calmly. "Only what I understand, only what reflects my consent, and only after I confirm it doesn't waive my rights." Fletcher's smile twitched. The Baker & Rowe attorney leaned in. "Mrs. Hale," he said, "this isn't adversarial." But his tabs were color-coded like a war plan. Marianne opened her folder. "Actually," she said evenly, "it is adversarial the moment false contact information is used and an unauthorized signer is submitted." Silence snapped across the table. Fletcher's eyes flashed. "Excuse me?" Marianne didn't flinch. She slid one sheet forward, toward the center, so everyone could see it. "Account restriction. Notice. Fraud review. Effective immediately. Time-stamped." The paper looked simple, but it carried weight. The kind of weight that makes powerful men suddenly careful. Fletcher's attorney picked it up and scanned it, jaw tightening. "This is unnecessary," Fletcher snapped. "We have a petition." Marianne lifted a hand slightly. "Your petition is pending," she said. "Our internal compliance hold is active." Fletcher's voice rose. "This is my money." Marianne's tone stayed flat. "It is a joint account under review due to suspected unauthorized initiation." I watched Fletcher's throat move as he swallowed. Pressure shifted. His control narrative was cracking under procedural language. Graham Voss finally spoke, trying to sound casual. "This is just a temporary measure," he said. "We can resolve it quickly if Mrs. Hale signs the waiver and confirms the new authorized structure." I turned my head to look at him fully. "Who are you?" I asked. "To tell me what I should sign?" Graham hesitated half a beat too long. Then Fletcher answered for him. "He's helping," Fletcher said. "He's with Stonebridge." There it was. Stonebridge Capital, the name from my call log. Evidence seed number 2 now had a body and a voice. Discovery. Fletcher wasn't just freezing assets. He was funneling them into a structure with outsiders. I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. I opened my call log and placed it on the table. Screen lit. Baker and Rowe, I said, pointing. Stonebridge Capital. Multiple calls during the night. Fletcher's attorney stiffened. Fletcher tried to laugh. "You're stalking me," he said. I kept my voice even. "I'm documenting," I replied. The notary cleared her throat again, firmer now. "I need to ask," she said, looking directly at me. "Has anyone pressured you to sign?" Fletcher's smile vanished. He leaned forward, eyes sharp. "Nora," he warned quietly. I didn't look at him. I looked at the notary. "Yes," I said. "He has." The word landed like a stamp. Fletcher's attorney raised a hand quickly. "Let's not," Marianne spoke over him, still calm. "Also," she said, "the email listed for Mrs. Hale on your packet is inaccurate by one character." She placed a copy of the envelope label on the table. The wrong domain. Evidence seed number 3 now in the open. The Baker and Rowe attorney's face darkened. Fletcher's mouth opened, then closed. Because that wasn't a misunderstanding. That was a tactic. Intercept confirmations, control communications, force a narrative. Fletcher's gaze flicked to Graham Voss. Like, "Fix this." Graham's jaw tightened. And that's when I reached into my bag one more time. I pulled out Daniel Cross's business card. I placed it on the table like a quiet grenade. The CEO's name, crisp in black ink. Fletcher went pale. Not dramatic pale, controlled pale, the kind that happens when a man sees the edge of a cliff under his feet. "You met with him," Fletcher hissed. I nodded once, dignified. "Yes," I said. The Baker and Rowe attorney sat back slightly, reassessing. Because the room had changed. It wasn't just a husband managing a wife anymore. It was a compliance hold, a notary questioning coercion, false contact info exposed, and the CEO's name sitting like a witness card. Fletcher's voice dropped to something venomous. "You think that protects you?" he said. "You have no idea what you're stepping into." Marianne slid one more document forward. A simple form titled, "Revocation of Authorized Signer Request. Immediate." She looked at me. "Mrs. Hale," she said, "if you sign this, we can remove Mr. Voss from consideration and lock the profile to in-person verification only." My hand moved toward the pen. Fletcher's chair scraped the floor. "Nora," he said, voice shaking with anger, "if you do that, I will—" The notary raised her stamp slightly, not threatening, just present. "I need everyone to remain calm," she said. I wrapped my fingers around the pen. And Fletcher lunged with his words, not his body. "You'll lose the house," he spat. "You'll lose everything. I'll make sure you're the one who looks guilty." I paused, pen hovering. Because here was the real pressure. Not the gala, not the dress, not the embarrassment, the threat of being framed by paperwork. I looked up at Fletcher, calm as a still lake. Then I turned to Marianne. "Print the transaction attempt details," I said quietly. "Every timestamp." Marianne nodded. Fletcher's eyes widened a fraction, because he knew what printed evidence does. And as the printer began to hum again, Fletcher's attorney stood abruptly. "We need a recess," he said. But Marianne didn't move. And neither did I. Because the table had finally become what it always should have been. A place where facts matter more than force. Still, if Fletcher had already filed an injunction, this was only one room in a bigger fight. So as I signed the revocation form with steady strokes, I wondered, what else had Fletcher set in motion outside these walls? The first thing I did after the bank meeting wasn't cry. It wasn't call my friends. It wasn't collapse. It was drive straight to a locksmith. Because financial control and physical access are cousins. And I wasn't going to sleep behind a door my husband believed he still owned. I chose new locks with a calm that surprised even me. Deadbolt. Reinforced strike plate. 2 new keys in my hand. Visible objects that felt like boundaries you could touch. Back at the house, I didn't slam anything. I didn't throw his suits on the lawn. I simply opened the front door with my old key, stepped inside, and changed the lock while the afternoon sun poured across the floor like it was approving. Then I placed Fletcher's key on the kitchen island in a small dish, like returning property to its rightful place. Pressure still existed, of course. My phone kept buzzing with Fletcher's messages, threats disguised as concern. "I'm trying to protect us. You're being manipulated. You'll regret this." I didn't answer, because I'd learned something crucial in the bank conference room. Men like Fletcher thrive on reaction. They starve when met with procedure. I called an attorney of my own, someone Marianne recommended, 1 sentence of credential only. She specializes in marital finance and asset protection. That was it. No savior speech. No dramatic rescue, just a professional who knew which forms mattered. Within hours, we filed a formal notice of separation of finances and a request for temporary orders regarding exclusive use of the home. Not revenge, protection. We also filed a written demand for certified copies of any petitions Fletcher had submitted. Certified copies are the difference between rumors and reality. The next morning, Marianne emailed me, at my corrected email, verified in person, confirming the account status. The hold remained in place, but now it was structured. Bills could be paid with dual authorization, no transfers without in-person verification, and no new signers without my direct consent. Fletcher couldn't starve me out. He couldn't drain me quietly. He couldn't move money through Graham Voss without tripping alarms. Evidence seed number 1, the compliance card, had paid off exactly as intended. Then came the deeper discovery. My attorney requested transaction histories, corporate filings, and a breakdown of Fletcher's business debts. The documents arrived in a thick envelope, real, stamped, not storybook. Sealed legal documents, now opened under my control. And there it was. Stonebridge Capital wasn't just helping. It was a bridge to something dirtier. Funds moving in circles, investments that didn't match reported income, transfers timed right before audits. The pattern wasn't marital conflict. It was financial misconduct. My call log, evidence seed number 2, matched the timeline perfectly. Late-night calls to Baker and Rowe right before unusual transaction attempts. Calls to Stonebridge right before a signer request appeared. The same names, the same urgency, the same panic. And Fletcher's fear of Daniel Cross? That paid off too. Because Daniel wasn't just a CEO who remembered my face. His company was acquiring a firm Fletcher had been using as a funnel. The acquisition meant new oversight, new transparency, new eyes. Daniel didn't save me, but his position triggered scrutiny that Fletcher could no longer dodge. That's how real consequences happen. Not with shouting, with systems. When Fletcher finally showed up at the house, it wasn't with flowers. It was with a new tactic, sweetness. He stood on the porch, hands open, voice soft like he'd been practicing. "Nora," he said, "let's be reasonable. I didn't open the door. I spoke through it, calm. My attorney will communicate with yours," I said. His softness cracked. "You're really doing this," he snapped, "over a misunderstanding." I glanced at the printed bank timeline on my counter. Attempted outgoing transfer. Unauthorized device signature. Signer request, Graham Voss. Wrong email by 1 character. Notary question, pressured to sign. These weren't misunderstandings. They were steps. A staircase built to lead me into a financial cage. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I just repeated, "My attorney will communicate with yours." Fletcher's voice rose. "You think Daniel Cross cares about you?" he barked. "You're a footnote to men like that." I paused, hand resting lightly on my locket. Then I said quietly, "This isn't about Daniel. This is about you." Silence. The kind that makes a man realize he's no longer the narrator. Within 2 weeks, the court granted temporary financial protections. No unilateral movement of joint funds, mandatory disclosure, and a clear order regarding the home. Realistic, administrative, exactly the kind of justice that doesn't need theatrics. And then the consequence Fletcher feared arrived. Not because I wished harm on him, but because paper trails don't care what you wish. Stonebridge Capital came under review. Graham Voss stopped returning calls. Baker and Rowe withdrew from streamlining and shifted into advising caution. And Fletcher, who'd always walked like the floor owed him, started moving like a man who'd realized the ground can be audited. One evening, Daniel asked to meet again. Neutral, quiet, no romance scene, just closure. At the same cafe, he placed a small file folder on the table. Inside was a single certified document. Proof that years ago, attempts to reach me were rerouted through a false address change, filed by someone with Fletcher's access. My name had been redirected. My life had been diverted. Evidence seed number 3, the wrong email tactic, had been his signature move all along. Daniel didn't ask me to forgive him. He simply said, "I'm sorry I believed the silence." I nodded once, not to comfort him, to acknowledge truth. Then I stood, because my life didn't revolve around unresolved men anymore. Back home, I set new rules. Not rules for Fletcher, rules for me. No signatures without counsel, no shared passwords, no documents left unopened, no shrinking in doorways. And the biggest rule of all, I would never again be told to stay in the back of my own life. If you've lived anything like this, type respect, because dignity isn't loud. Dignity is walking out of a ballroom with a cheap navy dress, a silver locket, and enough self-control to let the system do what it was designed to do. And when I locked my front door that night with my new key, the click wasn't just metal. It was my future choosing me back.